This kid would end up sacrificing his life to save the entire town. On October 2nd, 1988, a teenager named Donnie awakens in the middle of the road, having sleepwalked the night before. Initially bewildered by his surroundings, he surveys the area before breaking into a smile. He then rides his bike back to his home in a quiet Virginia town, where his family goes about their morning routine, seemingly unaware of his absence the previous night. Later that day, Donnie has dinner with his family, his parents, Eddie and Rose, and his sisters, Elizabeth and Samantha. The conversation turns to politics between Eddie and Elizabeth, prompting Rose to suggest that Elizabeth should consider attending Harvard the following year. Donnie, in his usual style, makes a sarcastic remark directed at his younger sister, sparking a disagreement between him and Elizabeth. That night, Rose confronts Donnie about his late-night disappearance, but he responds defensively, sarcastically suggesting that she should take his medication instead. Afterward, Rose discusses Donnie's behavior with Eddie. Eddie, unable to sleep, heads to the living room to watch TV. Meanwhile, upstairs, Donnie is roused from sleep by a strange voice, leading him to sleepwalk out of his bedroom. He passes by his father, who has dozed off in the living room, and follows the voice out into the dark streets. Eventually, Donnie arrives at a golf course, where he grins at the figure standing before him. Before Donnie stands a mysterious figure clad in a disturbing rabbit costume. The rabbit informs him that the world is destined to end in exactly 28 days, 6 hours, 42 minutes, and 12 seconds. Meanwhile, back at home, Elizabeth returns just as a deafening crash shakes the house, startling everyone inside. The next morning, Donnie awakens on the golf course, discovering a marker in his hand and the numbers 28, 6, 42, and 12 scrawled on his arm. When he returns home, he finds the scene buzzing with police and onlookers as a massive jet engine is being hauled out of his ruined bedroom. The FAA steps in, offering the family temporary lodging and compensation for the damages under the condition that they sign a non-disclosure agreement. However, Donnie learns that the FAA is baffled, unable to determine the origin of the jet engine. Later, in their hotel room, Samantha bombards her older siblings with questions about the mysterious jet engine, but they quickly brush her off. In the adjoining room, their parents discuss an old high school acquaintance who died tragically on the way to prom after experiencing a paranoid breakdown. Eddie expresses his fear that Donnie might face a similar fate. The following day, Donnie and Samantha meet up with their friends, Ronald, Sean, Joni, and Sharita. The girls are eager to hear details about the jet engine incident, while Donnie's friends casually offer him a cigarette. When Ronald starts teasing Sharita, Donnie steps in to defend her. At school, Donnie attends an English class where they're discussing The Destructors by Graham Greene. His teacher, Karen Pomeroy, asks for his thoughts on a passage about destruction. Donnie suggests that because destruction can be a form of creation, the characters in the novel might be driven to tear the world apart in hopes of making something new. As he finishes speaking, the classroom door opens, drawing everyone's attention to a new student, Gretchen Ross. Ms. Pomeroy playfully challenges Gretchen to sit next to the boy she finds most attractive, and she chooses Donnie. Later, on the way to Donnie's psychiatrist, Eddie expresses frustration over the repairs to their house and the FAA's refusal to provide any answers about the jet engine incident. Distracted by the conversation, Eddie nearly hits an elderly woman standing in the middle of the road. Donnie gets out to help, and she whispers something cryptic in his ear. At Dr. Thurman's office, Donnie recounts his encounter with the mysterious figure in the rabbit costume, whom he has named Frank. He explains how Frank told him the world is going to end, but he struggles to accept this. The next day in class, the students watch a motivational video about overcoming fears, presented by Jim Cunningham. Once again, Donnie hears Frank's voice, urging him to pay attention to the video. Later, while napping on the couch, Donnie dreams of the school submerged in water. He awakens to find Frank watching him. Under Frank's influence, Donnie sneaks out of the house with an axe in hand. He arrives at a building and smashes its water pipe. The following day, while waiting for the bus, Donnie teases Samantha about a short story she wrote. Sean then points out that their bus is running 20 minutes late. Two girls from school rush up to Donnie and his friends, excitedly announcing that the school is closed due to severe flooding. At the scene, Principal Cole stands inside the waterlogged building, observing the damage caused by a broken water main. Outside, they discover an axe lodged in the head of the school statue, with a cryptic message at its base. They made me do it. As Donnie walks back to school, he notices Gretchen being harassed by the bullies, Seth and Ricky. He intervenes, and the two end up walking together. During their conversation, Gretchen reveals that she and her mother moved to escape her violent stepfather, who had stabbed her mother. Donnie opens up about his own troubled past, admitting he was once arrested for burning down an abandoned house, but assures her that he has turned his life around since then. Before parting ways, Donnie asks Gretchen out on a date, and she agrees. During his next therapy session, Dr. Thurman places Donnie under hypnosis, prompting him to talk about Gretchen. As she attempts to steer the conversation towards school and his family, Donnie keeps drifting back to girls, even fantasizing about actress Christina Applegate. Dr. Thurman ends the session when she notices Donnie starting to unzip his pants. Back at school, the police instruct the students to write, "They made me do it" on the board, trying to match the handwriting with the vandal's message. When it's Donnie's turn, Principal Cole becomes suspicious of him, noting how quickly he completes the task. Later in the bathroom, Seth confronts Donnie, accusing him of spreading rumors that he was responsible for flooding the school. Seth then pulls a knife on Donnie, threatening him before walking away. Later that day, Donnie and his friends hang out in a field, shooting at bottles and debating the merits of the Smurfs. Their conversation is abruptly cut short when the same elderly woman that Eddie nearly hit before wanders into the middle of the road again, causing alarm for a passing driver. Donnie and his friends have nicknamed the elderly woman Grandma Death because she frequently stands in the middle of the road to check her empty mailbox, despite never receiving any mail. That evening, the school holds an emergency PTA meeting to address the recent flooding and vandalism. Mrs. Kitty Farmer, the gym teacher, blames the incident on the destructors, the novel being taught in Ms. Pomeroy's English class. Mrs. Farmer argues that the book inspired the vandalism and should be removed from the curriculum. Meanwhile, Donnie encounters Frank in his bathroom, who reassures him that no one will discover his involvement in the vandalism. As Donnie confronts the eerie figure, a strange force field seems to keep him from getting closer to Frank. When Donnie questions why Frank led him to flood the school, Frank only responds by warning that they are in serious danger. Frank then cryptically asks if Donnie believes in time travel, ending their conversation abruptly when Samantha enters the bathroom, causing Frank to vanish. On Poetry Day, Donnie reads a poem he wrote about Frank. Later, during a class led by Mrs. Farmer, she introduces attitude lessons, but Donnie challenges the idea, arguing that life and human emotions can't be reduced to simplistic categories. His defiance results in a call to the principal's office, where his parents, Rose and Eddie, are brought in. Despite Mrs. Farmer's frantic concerns, Donnie's parents remain unfazed by his behavior, though they decide to suspend his after-school activities as a consequence. Mrs. Farmer takes this opportunity to lecture Rose about her parenting, leaving Rose shocked. On October 10th, Donnie learns about time travel theories from his science teacher, Dr. Kenneth Monatoff, who gives him a book titled The Philosophy of Time Travel, written by a former nun who mysteriously turned to science. Donnie recognizes the author, Roberta Sparrow, as Grandma Death. In his next therapy session, Donnie talks about Roberta and mentions that Frank urged him to explore time travel, leading him to believe that Frank wants him to speak with Roberta. Donnie also tells Dr. Thurman that Roberta once said, "Every living creature dies alone," which reminded him of his childhood dog's death. Donnie confesses that he stopped thinking about God, but admits he fears being alone. That evening, while watching football, he notices a strange bubble-like aura emerging from his father and sister, guiding their movements. When Donnie looks down, he sees a similar bubble on his chest, leading him somewhere. He follows it to his parents' room, where he discovers a gun hidden in the closet. A week later, as Donnie walks home with Gretchen, they discuss the idea of turning back time. Donnie leans in to kiss her, but Gretchen pulls away, explaining that she wants their first kiss to be something memorable and special in the future. Meanwhile, Rose and Eddie, concerned about Donnie's behavior, visit Dr. Thurman to seek advice. Dr. Thurman suggests that Donnie is deeply afraid of the world, leading him to detach from reality. She also reveals that Donnie has been talking about someone named Frank, which is news to his parents. The signs indicate that Donnie might be experiencing daylight hallucinations and paranoid schizophrenia. As this unfolds, Donnie repeatedly stabs a knife into his bathroom mirror, imagining Frank staring back at him from the reflection. A few days later, Jim Cunningham hosts a school assembly, organized by Mrs. Farmer. During his presentation, Jim tells a story featuring a character named Frank, which distracts Donnie. When the students start asking Jim questions, Donnie finds his answers ridiculous and begins to berate him, offering crude and unconventional advice to the students. The adults are horrified by Donnie's outburst, but the students cheer as he's escorted out of the assembly. After school, Donnie vents to Gretchen about Jim's hypocrisy, handing her Roberta Sparrow's book and explaining the strange visions he's been having that seem connected to it. In search of answers, they visit Roberta's house, but no one answers the door. As they check her mailbox, they spot Roberta silently watching them from the terrace. In Donnie's mind, he hears Frank urging him to send Roberta a letter. The next day, Mrs. Farmer's relentless focus on teaching morality disrupts the other teachers. Dr. Monatoff declines to continue his philosophical discussions with Donnie when the conversation turns to God, and Ms. Pomeroy confiscates all copies of the Destructors from her students. While walking home from school, Donnie stumbles upon Jim Cunningham's wallet lying on the street, giving him Jim's address. Later, during a science presentation, Seth and Ricky mock Gretchen by bringing up her stepfather, which deeply upsets her. She storms out of the school with Donnie close behind. Overcome with emotion, Gretchen kisses Donnie, solidifying their budding relationship. That night, Donnie and Gretchen go to the movies together. As the film plays, Gretchen falls asleep, giving Donnie an opportunity to speak with Frank. Frank removes his mask, revealing the face of a young man with an injured eye. He shares that both his father and grandfather are also named Frank. As the movie distorts, Donnie sees a portal leading to the sky, followed by visions of fire. Frank cryptically advises him to burn it to the ground. Determined, Donnie leaves the cinema, formulating a plan. While the school's talent show, featuring Samantha's dance group, is in full swing, Donnie sneaks into Jim's house and douses it with gasoline. As Jim's house goes up in flames, the crowd at the talent show cheers, oblivious to what's happening. Donnie returns to the cinema, where Gretchen is still asleep, unaware that he ever left. The next morning, Donnie confides in his father, sharing his fears about losing his grip on reality. Wanting to reassure his son, Eddie advises Donnie to always speak his mind, regardless of what others might think. Donnie feels reassured by his father's confidence in him. Meanwhile, as firefighters extinguish the fire at Jim's house, they uncover explicit content involving minors, leading to Jim's arrest. On October 24th, Ms. Pomeroy is unexpectedly fired without any explanation. Samantha's dance group gets invited to perform in California, which excites their coach, Mrs. Farmer. However, her excitement quickly diminishes when she learns of Jim's arrest. In one of her final classes, Ms. Pomeroy uses the rabbits in Watership Down as a metaphor for human existence. Donnie interrupts, arguing that rabbits can't be compared to humans because they lack complex emotions. Gretchen adds that the rabbits, as products of the author's imagination, carry his emotions instead. That afternoon, Mrs. Farmer asks Rose to chaperone the dance group's trip to California, while she stays behind to defend Jim, convinced his arrest is a conspiracy. Later, Rose finds a disturbing drawing in Donnie's room. She informs him that she'll be leaving with Samantha for California, and since Eddie is in New York, Donnie and Elizabeth will be home alone. Noticing her unease, Donnie asks how she feels about having a son like him. Rose reassures him, saying she feels wonderful to have him as her son. A few days later, Donnie and Elizabeth say goodbye to Rose and Samantha as they leave for California. After school, Donnie finds Ms. Pomeroy packing up her things. Inspired by her story of a linguist choosing the words cellar door as the most beautiful in the English language, Donnie tells Sharita that things will get better for her. Tearfully, Sharita runs off, leaving her earmuffs in his hands. Donnie notices that Sharita has dropped a notebook with his name written on the cover. Later, during a session with Dr. Thurman, she puts him under hypnosis and asks about his parents. Donnie recalls a Christmas when he didn't receive the gift he wanted, leaving him with a lingering sense of regret. When pressed further about his regrets, he hesitantly admits to his recent misdeeds, explaining that he felt compelled to obey Frank because Frank saved his life, and he feared being left alone if he didn't. As he speaks, Donnie becomes emotional, his eyes welling up as he describes Frank's ominous prediction about the end of the world. Still under hypnosis, Donnie suddenly gets up and cradles a stuffed dog for comfort. He then opens his eyes, letting out a scream as he sees Frank standing before him. His fear subsides as he calmly tells Dr. Thurman that the sky is going to open up. She warns him that if that happens, there will be nothing left except him and Frank, a thought that brings Donnie to tears until Dr. Thurman snaps him out of the trance. Before he leaves, Dr. Thurman reveals that the medications he's been taking are actually placebos and advises him to stop using them. She also explains the difference between atheists and agnostics, suggesting that Donnie falls into the latter category. On October 29th, Elizabeth excitedly tells Donnie that she's been accepted into Harvard, and he proposes throwing a Halloween party to celebrate. That night, Gretchen arrives at the party, clearly upset about her missing mother. Donnie takes her to his room, where she confides in him, suspecting that her stepfather is involved in her mother's disappearance. They share an intimate moment, and after spending some time together, they rejoin the party. Meanwhile, Elizabeth is searching for someone named Frank. Donnie's euphoric mood shifts dramatically when he sees a bubble emerging from his chest, leading him to a note on the fridge that says, "Frank went out to buy beer." The bubble continues to guide him, revealing unsettling visions. Sensing danger, Donnie gathers Gretchen, Ronald, and Sean and takes them to Roberta Sparrow's house. He and Gretchen enter through the cellar door, but as they search for Roberta, Seth and Ricky ambush them, holding them at knife point. Ricky throws Gretchen to the ground and chases Ronald and Sean away. As a car approaches, Ricky warns Seth, who has Donnie pinned down. Ricky flees before the car arrives, but Roberta steps into the road, causing the driver to swerve and hit Gretchen. The impact forces Seth to release Donnie, who is left in shock as Seth escapes. Two boys emerge from the car, one of whom is Frank, now just an ordinary teenager. Consumed by grief and anger, Donnie uses the gun he took from his parents' room to shoot Frank in the eye. As Frank's friend flees, Roberta Sparrow approaches Donnie, having received the letter he sent her. She warns him that a storm is coming and urges him to act quickly. That morning, Donnie carries Gretchen's lifeless body back to his house. He then takes his parents' car and drives recklessly to a ridge overlooking the town, with Gretchen's body in the passenger seat. As he watches a dark vortex descend over his house, growing larger and larger, he laughs at the hopelessness of the situation. The vortex continues to expand, ultimately destroying the plane carrying Rose and Samantha. As Donnie gazes at Gretchen's face, the events of the past 28 days flash through his mind, and he mentally recounts the letter he wrote to Roberta. He confesses his fear that the time travel book might not be fiction and expresses a faint hope for something to look forward to, even as the world seems to be ending. Suddenly, Donnie finds himself back in his old bedroom, laughing as he realizes he has a chance to do everything over again. It's October 2nd once more, and Donnie has the opportunity to rewrite the past and save Gretchen. He stays in bed, waiting as the jet engine falls through the roof and crushes him under its weight. In this new timeline, those who would have had life-altering experiences with Donnie in the previous timeline wake up from their dreams, including the real Frank. The next morning, this timeline's Gretchen rides her bike past the Darko house as Donnie's body is wheeled away. But in this version of events, Gretchen never met Donnie. As she waves to Rose, neither of them recognizes the other, their connection erased in this new reality.
Make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you can watch more videos like this. Thanks for watching.